In the previous video we had a look at the exponential law for multiplying and the distributive law. Alright, so this is law 2 of exponents. It has two parts, subsection A and subsection B, effectively. Alright, so if the numerator, the exponent of the numerator, is bigger than the exponent of the denominator, you just write the base down and take top minus bottom. Alright, they must be dividing the same base, and we leave the base alone, and it's top minus bottom. However, if the top is bigger than the bottom, then we write it in the denominator under an invisible 1 that has become visible, and it's the big one minus the small one. It's always big minus small. Okay, I like to think of it as two weights. If you are standing over here and you have a heavy weight in this hand and you have an even heavier weight in that hand, then obviously if you trip and fall, you're going to fall that way. So if the bigger one is on top, you trip and fall to the top, and if the bigger one is at the bottom, you trip and fall to the bottom. Alright, always big minus small. So let's have a look over here. If we have x's and y's that are dividing, obviously we need the same with the same. Okay, we can't divide x's and y's. We need to divide x's with x's and y's with y's. Okay, in grade 9 we do learn how to use negative exponents. Grade 8s don't need to worry about that. Okay, between these two, the heavier one is on top, so they're going to stay on top, and then it's the big one, which is 6, minus the small one, which is 2. So it's 6 minus 2, and you don't need this step, but I'm showing it to you. Between the y's, the bottom one is bigger, and it's going to be the big one minus the small one, so 8 minus 4. So that gives us x to the power 4 and y to the power 4. Okay, most of my boys will by now know that if you have variables in the denominator, you want to have a restriction. In this case, the x and the y. X can't be 0 and y can't be 0. Okay, because if either of these is 0, then we have a undefined in the denominator. Alright. So here we group together the numbers, the x's and the y's. Okay, remember there's no exponent here, so there's an invisible 1. Alright, you type in negative 6 over negative 8, that gives you 3 over 4. Okay, 3 over 4, you can simplify that in your head as well. If your calculator gives you a decimal, you just press the SD button, okay? And if your calculator can't do that, then you're gonna have to do it by hand. Okay, between the x's, the top one is bigger, so they're gonna stay on top, and that's 5 minus 1, so that's 4. Between the y's, the bottom one is bigger by 5. And just in case we want a restriction, x can't be 0 and y can't be 0. Okay? Because if there is a variable in the denominator, that variable cannot be 0 if it's multiplied. Okay. Now, this is technically a combination of laws 1 and 2. So let's have a look at this. We have a 9. And we have x squared. Now, we have a negative number to an odd power. A negative number to an odd power is negative. Now you can write negative y to the power 3 over here. I don't like that, it doesn't look neat and tidy, but you can. Now you have 12x to the power 3y, okay? And just to make this look neat and tidy, what I would have done from the start is this: negative 9x squared y cubed. Now the negative is just in front. Okay, and that's 12x cubed y. Now I'm going to continue here because I didn't leave enough space for myself. What a silly mistake. Alright, I'm going to say negative 9 over 12. I know that the answer is going to be negative 3 over 4. Negative 3 over 4. Between the x's, the bottom one is bigger by 1. And if you want to write the 1, that's fine, but you don't have to. Alright, and between the y's, the top one is bigger by 2. Okay, just as an example over here, if we have something like x to the power 4, y to the power 5, over xy to the power 3. Then this is going to be x to the power 3, y to the power 2, and it's all going to be in the denominator, in the numerator, sorry. Or, because they're both bigger on top. Or if we have something like xy to the power 3, over x to the power 4, y to the power 5, then they're both going to be in the denominator, x to the power 3, y to the power 2, and because there's nothing on top, you need to write the invisible one. If there was a 4 here, then we'd leave the 4 on top, okay? But you need to be very careful where it is, in the numerator, in the denominator. That's very important. Alright. Let's look at a combination of law 1 and 2. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify each fraction on its own first. Okay, so we have 2x squared y multiplied with 7 over 14 gives me a half. Between the x's, the bottom one is bigger by 1. Between the y's, the top one is bigger by 4. I'm doing this very quickly. You need to practice this very well before you start combining them. Alright, and between these, 18 divided by 6 is 3. The x's stay on top, the y's stay at the bottom. Okay. I did forget one thing for this one. Your restriction would be that x is not allowed to be 0 and y is not allowed to be 0. Right, sometimes we give marks for that, other times we don't. Now, I hope you do agree with me that if there is no numerator, there's an invisible one. Okay, so this is equal to 2x squared y over 1 multiplied by y to the power 4 over 2x. You can put the invisible one, but you don't have to. Multiplied by 3x over y. Okay, so let's continue this one on the next page. I'm going to see whether I can just do that so that you can still see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to multiply. Remember, when you're multiplying fractions, if you have a over b multiplied with c over d, you multiply numerator with numerator and denominator with denominator. Alright, so this is 2x squared y multiplied by y to the power 4 multiplied by 3x. All over our denominator, 1 times 2x times y. Okay. Now 2 times 3 is equal to 6. X squared times x is x cubed. Y times y to the power 4 is y to the power 5. 1 times 2 is 2, x and y. Now I'm just going to simplify this. 6 over 2 is 3. Between the x's, the top one is bigger by 2. Between the y's, the top one is bigger by 4. That's our final answer. And remember, we had both x's and y's in the denominator, so they're not allowed to be 0. Don't put restrictions anywhere else. It's just for when you have variables in the denominator. Okay. Now, just a reminder, boys, that anything to the power 0 is equal to 1. It doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive or anything like that. Negative a to the power 0 is equal to 1, but negative a to the power 0 is equal to negative 1, because that negative is not part of the 0. Alright, so we have x times y to the power 0 is 1, x times 1 is x. Okay, x times y, all of this in a bracket to the power 0 gives me 1. Your teacher should have explained to you why this is the case. If you are curious, leave a comment or send me a WhatsApp and I will get back to you on that. Okay, so let's have a look at this example. Alright, this is a combination of laws 1 and 2. When you have a combination, you want to finish the numerator on its own. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. A squared times a is a to the power 3. B times b to the power 3 is b to the power 4. Okay. Now, if there is something to do with the denominator, you're going to do that as well. However, in this case, there's nothing to do with the denominator, so we're going to leave it like that. Remember your equal to sign. Negative and negative cancel each other out. 6 divided by 12 is a half, so there's at least going to be a 2 in the denominator. A cubed and a cubed cancel each other out, and between the b's, the top one is bigger by 2. If you did have that invisible one, that's fine. And because we had a and b in the denominator, we're going to say the restriction is that a is not allowed to be 0 and b is not allowed to be 0. Alright, to practice this, you can do exponents exercise 2 on page 49 and algebra exercise 9 on page 90.